It's Nolan. Now, before we get started, make sure y'all hitting that like button. Make sure y'all sharing it on your respective platforms. Let somebody know what we're doing today. Now, let's get into the show. Now that I got your attention, I guess I should probably mention I got a new album available now on my site. Nigga, fuck all that whining and bitching. You looking for greatness, then I'm the description. Dropping me by like a prison. Twisting your brow like ignition and split, nigga. That's what I call on the vision. I'm finna infiltrate, you cannot imitate. I'm from a pedigree, this is not Triple H. I took a road, you can't travel like Triple A. Do the impossible, just like a triple play. Genuine energy, I am not Timberlake. But a nigga too insane. Truck for the money, but to pull up in the ring. So I can give a what the fuck about what a nigga think. I'm on some new shit, elevated my rubric. I'm an industry nuisance, giving my 2 cents. Telling niggas what the truth is. It ain't even about music. Everybody wanna know the cheat code. Bitch, I got bops on reload. I was just on live 2 hours straight. Ain't playing not one repeat song. I'm ready for the spotlight. I was on the block like a stoplight. Every day I catch lightning in the bottle. The niggas told lies, but not hitting spots twice. Couple years I was living on fried rice. Like a tree when I got to eat Popeyes. Gotta feed 'em and get your whole top 5. Spit heat on top like a rabbi. It's no. What's going on, beautiful people? It's the kid J Nolan here. Welcome back to another episode of Inside the Industry, your number one source for music, entertainment, commentary, and breakdowns. Big shout out to all the insiders. I guess it's a big day for Megan today. All Megan news. I had other things planned, but y'all know when these lawsuits and stuff get filed, the narrative changes, the responses and all this stuff, we be having to come talk about it. So, of course, former Megan Thee Stallion photographer, videographer, and we're talking about social media content and things of that nature. Emilio Garcia, aka Emilio Coochie, of course, he's been suing Megan Thee Stallion for unpaid wages, harassment, being subjected to seeing Megan allegedly service women sexually in the back of a SUV in Ibiza or something like that. All this other stuff. He's been trying to get at Megan for probably since last summer. He's seen no success as of yet, and as Megan has been trying to get his lawsuit dismissed, he comes back with an amended complaint with all new allegations. Okay? From what I'm seeing on social media, they're saying that Emilio is now alleging that all of Megan Thee Stallion's companies are all shell companies for illegal activity. You sure you want to take that play? Without further ado, let's get into it. All right, y'all, let's get it right into it. This is 54 pages. Jesus Christ. Emilio Garcia, individual plaintiff against Roc Nation, LLC, a Delaware business, Hot Girl Touring, LLC, Megan Thee Stallion Entertainment, Inc., Megan Thee Stallion, an individual. Now let's see what we have on the table here. We already know who's involved. Here's the preliminary statement. He starts the amended complaint with lyrics from Megan Thee Stallion's best friend. Those of y'all that have been tuned in here, y'all know he made reference to this song in his last filing and his last bit of allegations. So here it says, "Hey, 2 red bones kissing in the back seat. Girl, don't stop. Keep going and relax me. You want me to join in? Then ask me. I like girls that attract me." So he's jumping off the porch, off the rip, basically, I guess, alluding to the fact that these lyrics are based on real and true events. Okay? That's a weird way to start this, but 2025 is off to an odd start. Plaintiff was employed as Megan Pete's personal cameraman. Unfortunately, the hypersexualized and graphic lyrics pervasive throughout Pete's music blended into the working relationship between Pete and her employees as she subjected plaintiff to unlawful discrimination, harassment, and retaliation on numerous occasions. One such instance of unlawful sexual harassment involves Pete forcing plaintiff to witness her perform group sex with her quote-unquote best friends, as alluded to in the lyrics from her song bearing the same name. Emilio, I don't know if you saw the Young Thug trial. I don't know if you're seeing the YNW Melly trial as it's been planning out. But if you're trying to use a rapper's lyrics as proof you're doing yourself a severe disservice. You should have probably stuck to unpaid wages. That might have been your biggest claim to fame here. All this other stuff, you don't have any video and or photo proof, and you're the photo guy. So how are you supposed to give us any material that supports your claim? I'll continue. Plaintiff tried to ignore the harassment and other unlawful acts detailed herein, but defendant's treatment of him grew worse until defendants unlawfully terminated his employment. Cruelly, defendant's retaliation stems beyond the period of plaintiff's employ, as upon information and belief, plaintiff was blackballed by Pete because he was uncomfortable being subjected to sexual harassment and opposed unlawful wage practices. Now, when you say that you have been blackballed and you're using that as a term to basically say that you've been shut down, you would also, the burden of proof would also be placed upon you to show where you've been blackballed, which means that you're struggling to find work. Meaning that Megan Thee Stallion would be responsible for your struggle to find work. I know it may sound like I'm backing Megan Thee Stallion here. I'm really not. I just think that these are extremely frivolous claims. Plaintiff's complaint pursuant to the New York State human rights law, the New York City blah, 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 California Fair Employment and Housing Act, Government Code 12926D, California Labor Code, among other laws as set forth below. This is where they lay out the parties included. I really don't care about this part. We all know who's involved here. Where does this actually become relevant? Defendants were in charge of and had control over defendants' policies and procedures with respect to its unlawful policies, acts, and practices, including but not limited to payroll, timekeeping, scheduling, and otherwise running the business. The defendants share a common commercial business purpose, address, and location. And even with your unpaid wages thing being your strongest, it's still weak as hell, because you've been claiming that you were an employee of Megan Thee Stallion when you were a contractor. You know you were a contractor, but you don't want to admit you were a contractor. Even when they were paying you a monthly stipend, you weren't on actual payroll, but whatever. You weren't an employee. Although defendants may be separate and distinct business entities and individuals, they engage in related activities. So he's drawing parallels and business relativity between Megan, Rock Nation, and everyone in here. Okay. Defendants shared plaintiff as well as other employees acted in the interest of each other with respect to employees, paid their employees by the same method, shared control over their employees, hired and fired employees, administered disciplinary procedures, used the same human resources, employees, supervised employee, maintained payroll, provided insurance, controlled the terms and conditions of employee employment, employed the individuals who committed the unlawful acts alleged herein, and are themselves under common control and management. The corporations and or entities are owned, operated, and controlled by the same owner or owner group, operating as a unified operation, and upon information and belief, each provides mutually supportive services to the substantial advantage of the other, such that each entity may be treated as agents of each other, independent contractors, subcontractors, a single enterprise, and or joint employers. So you know what an independent contractor is in here, but you can't see that you were one yourself. Upon information and belief, defendants were plaintiffs' employers at all times relevant. Further, at all times relevant, the defendant entities were and now are related to or form an organization, the entity's holding, parent, sister, and or subsidiary corporation, and or alter egos of each other and whiner. Further, upon information and belief, some or all of the defendant entities are mere shell and sham entities without capital or assets, and were conceived, intended, and were by whiner and the entities as a device to avoid liability and for the purposes of substituting a financially insolvent corporation, entity, or related subsidiary or parent company. Plaintiff further alleges, upon information and belief, the defendant entities at all relevant times were the alter egos of each other and Pete, and there exists, and at all relevant times has existed a unity of ownership between the defendants, such that any separateness has ceased to exist, in that the entities, owners, members, and Pete used and continue to use, commingle, or restrict the assets for their own use without adequate consideration, and have withdrawn funds from these entities for its parent organizations, and Pete's use and or collusion at all times herein mentioned were controlled, dominated, and operated by defendant entities, their owners, and Pete as their individual business and alter ego, in that the activities and business of defendants were and are carried out without the holding of proper directors or shareholders meetings, commingled funds and accounts, and proper insurance. No records or minutes of material corporate proceedings were maintained, and defendants entered into misrepresented and sham transactions. Hold on. He jumped off into some shit. Okay, it looks to me like he's really barking up the wrong tree here. So all the defendants named here, I guess it's important for me to rename them. Rock Nation LLC, Hot Girl Touring, Megan Thee Stallion Entertainment, and Megan Thee Stallion as an individual artist, aka Megan Pete. He's saying that all of these companies are one and the same, basically, and that they're simply shell companies of each other, commingling with all of the same employees, all of the same HR, all of the same everything. This is going to fall apart instantly. I was sitting here confused. I'm like, there's no way that his lawyers are moving forward with this type of shit. But here it is in front of my eyes. I had to stop for a minute, reread what I'm thinking I'm seeing, and I'm still baffled. This man and his legal team say the corporations and or entities are owned, operated, and controlled by the same owner or owner group, operating as a unified operation, and upon information and belief, each provides mutually supportive services to the substantial advantage of the other, such that each entity may be treated as agents of each other, independent. What the? This is craziness. Sham transactions. So, just to be clear, let me. You stupid as hell, boy, and your lawyers. So, what he's trying to go ahead and throw out there is that Rock Nation and Hot Girl Touring, Megan Thee Stallion Entertainment, and Megan Thee Stallion, aka Megan Pete, as an individual, are all the same thing in so many ways. Rock Nation has its own division. They manage Megan Thee Stallion. She's not even a signed artist to Rock Nation. They manage her business affairs. They get her endorsements and things of that nature, and they take a percentage of her income based on that. Megan Thee Stallion Entertainment, I'm sure, is probably has some connection to her music business, although she has a label now, Hot Girl Productions, which is not included here because she just established it after she terminated him. Hot Girl Touring is a touring business, which means that it keeps track of the money that she makes on or off tour, which also means that the touring company has to pay expenses, whether that be for venues, whether that be for transportation pertaining to the artist on tour, housing on tour, and whatever other extra expenses that are incurred on tour. Oh, boy, what is going on? What is with these people trying to sue Megan Thee Stallion? They don't even have comprehensible information. Sham transactions? At all relevant times, defendants knowingly and willfully failed to pay plaintiff lawfully earned overtime wages in contravention of the New York labor law and California labor code. At all relevant times, defendants knowingly and willfully failed to pay plaintiff lawfully earn spread of hours premiums in contravention of the New York labor law. At all relevant times, plaintiff was an employee of defendant, including but not limited to the definition of the term under the NYSHRL, NYCHRL, NYLL, FEHA, California Labor Code, and other applicable laws below. At all relevant times, defendants were an employer and supervisors of plaintiff, including but not limited to the definition of the term under blase blah. Wow. Statement of facts. Plaintiff was hired in 2019 to serve as Pete's personal cameraman. As a personal cameraman, you're already an independent contractor off the board. You said it here, personal cameraman. So if she's got you hired as a personal cameraman, where do all of these businesses come into play where you would be an employee? Whatever. As part of defendant's practices, plaintiff was required to not only take photos, videos, and edit content, which was all done under the strict control and direct supervision of Pete, but also to accompany Pete almost anywhere she went as part of her entourage. Entourage is also not an employee, but whatever. This entourage included Pete, plaintiff, dancers, makeup artists, nail techs, and others who were unable to spend their time for their own benefit, as Pete was always looming, micromanaging, and otherwise trying to cultivate a vibe. All of these other professions named are also independent contractors who have the ability to create their own companies and serve as a contractor to Megan, but I wonder what they would say. Indeed, this vibe was one where Pete was perceived as the leader and all others subservient, present only to attend to the needs and demands of Pete. Yes, that's what you do when you work for somebody, even if you're not an employee, because you're contracted to do so. By way of example, whenever Pete was dieting, which was frequently, she would forbid anyone from eating around her. You're still on this eating thing. As a result, plaintiff and other employees who were working sometimes 16 plus hours a day were forced to eat in secret. Indeed, even when there was catering, Pete would explicitly forbid people from eating in her presence. If she saw a plaintiff or anyone eating, Pete would launch into a temper tantrum, ridiculing anyone who brought food into her vicinity. Plaintiff, who was open with Pete about his eating disorders and struggles with weight, felt targeted, ashamed, and humiliated by Pete's ridicule. Pete held plaintiff and others to her unreasonable and illegal standard of beauty and targeted those, including plaintiff, who failed to conform. By way of further example, plaintiff, as part of Pete's entourage, was required to attend strip clubs, nightclubs, and other excursions. The more Pete became inebriated, the more demanding and bossier she would become. Plaintiff was afraid that Pete would retaliate against him if he refused to acquiesce to her every demand, fears that would unfortunately come to fruition. What I don't understand about some of these situations where people complain about working for somebody who becomes bossy is, why don't you quit? Why don't you leave? Why don't you find work elsewhere? Why do you stay? I've worked many jobs. I hated them bitches. And the first opportunity I had, I found some other shit, gave my 2 weeks notice, left up out that bitch. Whatever. The birthday strip club excursion in New York City. So this is new. Plaintiff had to travel with Pete and her entourage as part of his duties. Other than when they were in California, plaintiff spent most of his working time for defendants in New York. You know what I find interesting? You never said that. You said that most of your time was spent in California. Now you're inserting New York all of a sudden, right? Because you were trying to say that she was a resident of California and you was always in her house and you wasn't allowed to do shit. You couldn't do nothing on your personal time or dime. Now, all of a sudden, New York's been inserted into the conversation. Which one is it? On average, plaintiff was in New York at least once per month and sometimes remained in New York for weeks at a time, which does make sense because Megan does go to New York. That's where Roc Nation's headquarters are. That's where they put the game plans together for her career and all that stuff. Makes a lot of sense. That's where the radio stations are, even though she doesn't do a lot of radio press. That's where a lot of media, entities reside, those that are outside of the LAs and the Atlantas, right? Plaintiff spent a substantial amount of time working in both California, New York State, and New York City and suffered the unlawful acts detailed and harm alleged herein in these locations. For example, on or around February 15, 2022, plaintiff and the entourage were required to accompany Pete to a New York City strip club in celebration of her 27th birthday. Now, I know this is going to be some bullshit because New York strip clubs don't even let the women get naked. You should have went to Atlanta or Miami. Plaintiff, who is a gay man and not attracted to women, only went with Pete because she required him to. Oh, boy. No, you didn't. In fact, Pete had a proclivity for going to strip clubs and compelled plaintiff to go on dozens of trips to strip clubs in New York, California, Atlanta, Georgia, and overseas. Plaintiff attended strictly out of his duties to his employer, not for his own pleasure or benefit. On this particular birthday strip club trip, Pete took a liking to one of the female dancers. Pete began physically touching the dancer in a sexually provocative manner, which made plaintiff feel extremely uncomfortable, embarrassed, and disgusted, as he was only present because he was Pete's employee and she made him attend. Plaintiff tried to avoid the sensual contact he was witnessing his boss take part in, but was unable to leave. So now he is completely disgusted and repulsed by the strip club, and now he's being forced to witness it with Megan filling up on a dancer. Another member of Pete's entourage, in earshot of both Pete and plaintiff, noticed Pete was taking a liking to the dancer and asked what her real name was. The stripper responded with her name. Her surname happened to be the same as plaintiff's and is a surname shared by hundreds of thousands of Americans. Naturally, everyone who heard this, including Pete, looked at plaintiff to see his response. With dozens of eyes on him, plaintiff felt obliged to respond, acknowledging they shared a surname by joking, "Hey, cousin." So they must have the same last name, as in Garcia. In response, Pete immediately shot plaintiff a sinister look, a look so malignant that he had never seen Pete express before. The entourage and Pete resumed partying, but it was clear to everyone that plaintiff's innocuous comment had flipped a switch in Pete, who refused to acknowledge plaintiff the rest of the night. So what? You're trying to allege that you said, "Hey, cousin," to this dancer, and she just was like, "Oh, you trying to jump in on my game? You see me taking an interest in this lady over here?" And she just said, "Fuck you," for the rest of the night. As a result of this treatment, combined with being forced to watch his boss Pete engage with a stripper, plaintiff began to feel even more uncomfortable and ashamed, even though he had done nothing wrong. As a result of Pete's acts and omissions, plaintiff removed himself from the situation and proceeded to leave the strip club and wait in one of the SUVs in the convoy, waiting for Pete and the entourage. In opposition to these unlawful acts, plaintiff waited in the SUV rather than going to the hotel because he still felt compelled to remain on the premises as part of his duties as a member of Pete's entourage. So you waited outside instead of going back to the hotel. Unfortunately, this incident would set the tone of the deterioration in the party's working relationship, predicated on Pete fostering a hostile work environment. So now we're going to get into the same bullshit that he'd been talking about the whole time. Pete forced plaintiff to watch as she engaged in group sex during their trip to Spain. So this is in the same year, in or about June 2022. Plaintiff traveled with Pete to Ibiza, Spain as part of her summer 2022 tour. As was defendant's practice, plaintiff was required to join Pete and the entourage to a nightclub in Ibiza. When Pete was through partying, she and the entourage filed out of the nightclub into a caravan of SUVs waiting in front. Plaintiff got into one SUV along with Pete and three of her quote-unquote best friends, DK, QJ, and Jayla. The SUV had a driver and an unknown passenger sitting in the front seats. I wonder if any of these people would be willing to testify to your claim. This SUV had a large passenger compartment, the front bench seat positioned directly behind the driver, and front passenger seats faced the rear of the vehicle. The rear of the SUV had a forward-facing bench seat. As such, the driver and front passenger were separated from the passenger compartment, which had two bench seats that allowed the passengers to face each other. Plaintiff sat in the seat with its back up against the driver's seat. Plaintiff was on the left side of the vehicle and facing the rear. To the left of plaintiff, in the middle of the front bench seat, was Jayla. Across from plaintiff and Jayla sat three remaining passengers, QJ on the left side, facing forward and directly across from the plaintiff, Pete in the middle of the rear bench, facing forward and directly across from Jayla, and DK to Pete's right on the right side of the vehicle, facing forward with an open seat in front of her. The SUV departed the nightclub and plaintiff began to play music from his phone as directed by Pete, as would require employees as part of their job duties. So now you playing some music on the aux is an inconvenience to you as well. Come the fuck on. At first, Pete and the best friends were dancing to the music and generally continued to party. Suddenly, Pete, who was upon information and belief intoxicated, began to put her hands on her best friend's faces, breasts, and buttocks. Soon, Pete was kissing her best friends. This made plaintiff feel uncomfortable as he was in an SUV in a foreign country at night with his boss who was acting inappropriately. Unlike the harassment that occurred at the New York strip club, plaintiff was unable to remove himself from the situation and began to become very distressed. Pete continued to escalate the sexual acts in which she and her best friends were engaging. Next, Pete got out of her seat and moved forward towards Jayla, whom she was sitting across from. Pete removed Jayla's undergarments, exposing her vaginal area. Vagina. I be trying to say stuff in a weird way to make sure YouTube ain't flagging me, because they be hitting a nigga over some weird shit sometimes. So don't think I can't read. I just be saying shit weirdly because of YouTube's guidelines. Pete then proceeded to take her fingers and insert them, otherwise known as fingering. Pete stimulated Jayla with her index and middle fingers on the right hand. DK commented that Pete had long-ass nails. We went over this last time. The next morning, Jayla complained that her vaginal area was in pain due to the long fingernails which Pete was wearing at the time of her sex act. Taking Pete's lead, the other best friends began to perform sex on one another and Pete. When Pete finished fingering Jayla, she moved on to DK. DK then removed Pete's undergarments and began to perform cunnilingus on Pete. So he's saying he had to witness Megan Thee Stallion doing some fingering and pleasuring of one. Then she turned and moved, and then her undergarments was slipped off, and he had to witness Megan cootie out getting ate up in the back of the vehicle. This is his allegations. The group sex which was taking place in front of plaintiff made him feel extremely uncomfortable, disgusted, and in disbelief. Plaintiff was not Pete's best friend, nor was he a friend at all. Rather, plaintiff was only present in the SUV to perform his duties as Pete's employee. So y'all was never friends. Huh. Interesting. Trying to pull a Jay-Z, are ya? Plaintiff was in the middle of Spain, a country in which he was unfamiliar, and it was the middle of the night, making it impossible to remove himself from the situation. As such, plaintiff continued to play music on his phone, looked out the window, and otherwise tried to ignore the orgy in which Pete was participating, and forced plaintiff to witness in a clear effort to avoid the inappropriate sexual acts and oppose such unlawful activities which constituted inferior terms and conditions of employment. This sound like some freak off shit. It sound like you're being advised by Tony Busby. Upon information and belief, Pete did not forget this incident. Rather, she relishes in it. In October 2024, Pete released her most recent studio album, Megan Act 2. The fifth track of the album is the song titled Best Friend. The first verse of Best Friend clearly memorializes the sexual harassment to which plaintiff was subjected in the SUV when Pete had sex with her best friends. Here we get another quote of those same lyrics that appeared up top. Eventually, the SUV reached the residence where he, Pete, the best friends, and other employees of defendants were staying. Wanting to continue the party, Pete led the entourage to a basement room of the resident, which was set up to be like a nightclub. See what I'm saying? It sounds like some freak off shit. In the so-called nightclub, which is really in the basement of someone's home, another employee, Alex, took over the duties of DJing. Apparently, Pete did not like the music Alex was playing. Rather than ask Alex to change the music, Pete approached Alex from behind, yanked his hair back, screaming, "Fucking change this shit." He must have been playing some Tory Lanez for all that to happen now. Come on. About 10 minutes later, Pete's personal chef announced that dinner was served. Everyone was seated at an outdoor dining table, including plaintiff Alex, Pete, and her best friends, and others. So you mean to tell me they was playing music, she yanked this nigga head, said change this shit, they get back to partying, and then 10 minutes later, y'all eating dinner. But this was supposed to be a nightclub in a basement. You didn't even say an hour later, you said 10 minutes? Okay. The chef prepared a vegan dish for Pete, who was dieting at the time. Everyone else was served grilled sea bass over a kale salad. We talked about this shit before too. The shit still sound good to me too. Plaintiff was still extremely uncomfortable being around Pete, but tried to proceed as normal as the entire entourage was present, but only he, Pete, and the best friends knew about the group sex incident. Crazy how they was in the car allegedly eating some sea bass, and now they got it served on a plate. Suddenly, plaintiff felt Pete was giving him a dirty look once again. The last time plaintiff felt Pete look at him like this was during the February 2022 incident in New York strip club. Pete shouted at plaintiff so everyone could hear, "Are you really eating that, you fucking fat bitch? Spit that shit out." So, dinner is served. Everybody's eating the same dish, as a matter of fact, except Megan. Prepared by her personal chef. But she gonna pick you out of the bunch and say, "Are you really eating that?" This was consistent with Pete's anger towards those who ate in her presence while she was dieting, but this time Pete directed her rage at plaintiff and Alex. Upon information and belief, this was in retaliation for plaintiff's prior protected activity and opposition to the unwanted sexual conduct he was forced to witness. Alex, please come to the front and let us know what happened. Plaintiff responded politely, albeit confused, as he was eating a healthy meal prepared by Pete's chef and everyone else was eating the same dinner. Pete continued, "Why are you still chewing? Spit that shit out." Then Pete grabbed the food off of Alex's plate, who was sitting closer to Pete than plaintiff was, and threw the food over her shoulder. Now, this was not included in the previous filing. Wow, she threw your shit like salt for good luck. God damn. Plaintiff was humiliated and ashamed. He got up, nervously laughed, excused himself, and proceeded to go to sleep for the night. The next morning, plaintiff woke up early and went to the residence's kitchen to find some breakfast. There he encountered Pete and the personal chef. Pete made eye contact with him and said, "Were you in the car with us last night?" Plaintiff responded truthfully that he had, and plaintiff made it clear he did not appreciate and opposed such unlawful conduct. Suddenly, the color drained from Pete's face, and she immediately changed her tone, threatening plaintiff, "Don't you ever speak about what happened in the car." After subjecting plaintiff to sexual harassment and fatphobic comments, defendant retaliated. As soon as plaintiff returned from Ibiza, he noticed a clear shift in the terms and conditions of his employment with defendant. By way of example, prior to this trip, plaintiff was booked regularly, frequently, every week, and sometimes worked 7 days per week. Indeed, plaintiff was part of Pete's traveling posse. If you was a part of a traveling posse, do you think that actually upholds the idea that you were an employee? However, after Pete subjected plaintiff to the harassment detailed herein, defendant began to request fewer services of plaintiff in favor of other photographers, which, to be honest, whether or not there was any sort of harassment, or altercation, she would be well within her right to employ multiple photographers. Nobody said that she was obligated to only work with you. Oh boy. Due to the pay structure in place, this had a direct impact on plaintiff's compensation, and failure to book plaintiff certainly negatively impacted the terms and conditions of his employment. However, Pete continued to forbid plaintiff from working with any other celebrities or anyone else for that matter. Indeed, Pete remained possessive over plaintiff and prevented him from working elsewhere, but deliberately failed to give him work. This was by design and retaliation against plaintiff. When Pete did call plaintiff to work and reassimilate into her entourage, Pete made clear she held disdain for plaintiff. By way of example, in August 2022, plaintiff was with Pete in a hotel room in Portugal with Alex and others. Plaintiff was tired but forbidden from leaving the entourage as Pete wanted to keep him close and under her direct control. Plaintiff sat down in a chair and placed his head on a pillow while Pete and the others continued to dance, drink, and party. Suddenly, plaintiff was jolted to his feet when an object, which upon information and belief was a TV remote, was thrown at him and hit his head. So she threw a remote at this nigga and hit him in the shit, allegedly. Plaintiff looked, saw Pete standing where the remote had come from, and asked who threw the remote at his head. However, everyone was silent as they were all afraid to truthfully say that Pete threw the remote. Initially, Pete denied throwing it, but then in a raised voice shouted, "So what if I did throw it? Then what? What are you gonna do about it?" Wow. Megan Thee Stallion done turned into Angelica Pickles on his ass. Ain't this some shit? Stupid babies. Clearly, Pete was both physically and mentally intimidating plaintiff in an effort to keep him silent about what took place in Ibiza, Spain, amongst other unlawful acts detailed herein. Around this time, also in August 2022, defendants further altered the terms and conditions of plaintiff's employment. Now defendants altered plaintiff's compensation structure from a monthly rate to a pay-per-task system for each assignment. Despite this change, plaintiff remained accountable and was expected to provide the same level of service to Pete. As 2022 turned into 23, plaintiff's work assignments continued to taper off. He was becoming unable to pay his bills, yet was forbidden by Pete from working for anyone else. Plaintiff was terrified, but stuck with the impossible choice of remaining silent and being unable to make ends meet, or complaining to defendants who had demonstrated time and time again that you do not oppose, complain, or otherwise say no to Pete. Lacking a human resources representative to whom he could complain, and bound by an NDA, plaintiff felt alone and powerless. In 2023, he confided in Alex about Pete's unlawful pay practices and acts of retaliation, unlawful acts to which Alex herself had experienced and witnessed. Okay, Alex, we're going to need you to come out. Defendants terminated plaintiff's employment. I would think by this time, this would be doing you a favor. In June 2023, Pete was on tour in Europe with Alex and others. As part of defendant's retaliation campaign against plaintiff, he was excluded from this trip, was not compensated, yet was prohibited from working elsewhere. At that point, it's fuck you. I'm resigning. I will no longer be providing services for you. I will find clients elsewhere. Suck my dock. On a Sunday night, plaintiff received a FaceTime call from Alex, the employee whom plaintiff had confided in about defendant's unlawful practice. It was about 10 p.m. in Houston, Texas, where plaintiff answered the call. Instead of Alex, Pete was on the other side. Plaintiff heard shouting and commotion and saw the same angry look in Pete's face that he recognized from the New York City strip club Ibiza and other times. Pete lashed out, "Bitch, you want to fucking quit on me, ho? You want to quit on me, bitch?" Plaintiff was caught off guard and confused about these accusations, as plaintiff did not want to quit. Rather, he wanted to work in a respectful environment and be paid all of the wages owed. Plaintiff explained this, engaged in a protected activity as he bravely opposed defendant's unlawful wage practices to Pete's face. Now, what I'm not understanding here is if you were not called, you were not asked to be there, why would she hit you up and say that and ask if you quit? That sounds to me that you were supposed to actually be there and you chose not to show up in an act of rebellion. if this conversation ever happened and she called your ass. Now, if this did happen and she spoke to him in this manner, I would not agree with that. Okay? In response, Pete continued to yell at plaintiff, called him bitch and hoe, and repeated, "I can't believe you do me like this." Pete continued to blame plaintiff's relationship with his boyfriend, saying, "Ever since you got with blank, he made you a lazy bitch." Plaintiff politely explained this is not true and further complained about defendant's retaliatory acts of reducing his hours and ongoing harassment, such as this FaceTime where he was berated, labeled a bitch as a gay man. Whoa, 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 whoa. Now, what we're not going to do is say that she was labeling you a bitch because you are a gay man, when we know black women in particular throw that word around quite frequently, whether it be an insult, a term of endearment, or otherwise. Not to mention, in the gay community, bitch is thrown around in the exact same manner. Let's have some respect for ourselves and others here. Pete blamed the corporate defendants who are based in New York, saying it was Roc Nation who books her people, not Pete. Upon information and belief, Pete and the corporate defendants aided and abetted in the unlawful acts detailed herein and ratified the unlawful acts of one another. What I'm not understanding is how it's unlawful for them to decide not to book your ass and use other photographers or cameramen. I would love to know where that violates the law. Overwhelmed and intimidated by Pete's demeanor, plaintiff broke down in tears. In response, with cold indifference, Pete quipped, "Don't confide in Alex," and hung up the phone. Little did plaintiff know that this would be the last time he spoke with Pete. Shortly thereafter, representative of defendants contacted plaintiff to inform him his services were no longer required under purported change in creative direction. Defendant's retaliation continues after the termination. Plaintiff was devastated by the unlawful termination of his employment. However, now that defendants had terminated him, he was finally free to seek work elsewhere, as defendant explicitly prohibited this before. Those of y'all that have been keeping track of this case with me, y'all know that I've pulled up several photos and different things that he did during the time that he was working with Megan. So I find it very interesting that he wasn't allowed to work with anyone, that he was completely cut off, but he was still posting photo shoots. Unless he would say, I was just posting old photos, which could be possible as well, but unlikely. In August 2023, one of plaintiff's friends, who was a photographer in the industry, reached out as there was a 3-day photo shoot in LA and photographers were needed. Initially, plaintiff was hired for this gig and excited about the prospect of getting back on his feet. Unfortunately, the day before the shoot was scheduled, the production company contacted plaintiff and said he was off the job without explanation. Subsequently, plaintiff learned the shoot was for the music video of Bongos, a song by Cardi B featuring Pete. Upon information and belief, Pete interfered with plaintiff's contract in further retaliation. Further, upon information and belief, Pete has blackballed plaintiff among celebrities and performers to make it impossible for him to work in the entertainment industry ever again. Ever again? So, if she fired you, what makes you think she would be okay with you coming and working on the set of a production that included her? To me, that's not blackballing. That's don't bring your ass over here because I just fired you. You would have to then come to the table with some more situations of you being blackballed. A blackball is not, I didn't get this job one time because I was supposed to work on set with Cardi B and the artist that fired me. You would need, in order to be blackballed, I would expect anywhere between 5 to 10 separate occasions that specifically state you can't be here. Megan Thee Stallion said, fuck you, we can't work with you. And it would also have to be that she's not even present and that she has coaxed other people in the industry to say no. With direct reference to say, Megan said, we can't work with you. or due to my alliance to Megan Thee Stallion, I can't work with you, so that you can actually create a paper trail of being blackballed. I'm not a legal professional here. I'm just saying. Indeed, plaintiff has been unable to secure comparable employment like he had with defendants, and unfortunately probably never will as a result of defendants' influence in the tight-knit entertainment industry. I'm quite sure you were the personal cameraman of an international superstar. You've been fired. So securing comparable employment like that, you had a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. There's not too many people that get put in that position. That's not her fault, though. You got fired for whatever. Hey, if she had sex in front of you, that was wrong. If she cussed your ass out, that was wrong. If she called you a fat ass, that was wrong. But if your work was that great, I'm sure you could find other clients. And if not, why is that her fault? Indeed. I already went through that part. In the end, and while these are just some of the examples of the discrimination, harassment, and retaliation plaintiff endured, defendants' actions were intended to and did create a hostile work environment replete with discrimination, retaliation, and disparate treatment that no reasonable person should or would tolerate. As a result of defendants' actions, plaintiff suffered unbearable humiliation and degradation. Plaintiff was harassed, demeaned, and suffered severe emotional harm. As a result of defendant's discriminatory and intolerable treatment of plaintiff, she suffered and continues to suffer severe emotional and physical distress. Whoa, 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 hold on. Are they identifying you as a she, sir? Who wrote this? As a result of the acts and conduct complained of herein, plaintiff has suffered and will continue to suffer the loss of income, the loss of a salary. What you mean you will continue to? Nobody said that you was... This sound like I'm against you. Who said that you are entitled to work as a celebrity photographer, videographer for the entirety of your life? If that doesn't work out, there's a million other professions you could go into. Nobody gives a fuck about somebody who's not thriving in their profession until you are thriving again. Same thing happens for rappers, singers, entrepreneurs of all kinds. So to say you will continue to suffer loss of income, that just tells me you don't even believe in your own goddamn self, and y'all trying to put it on her to say, because I can't work in this industry because of her, I'm going to continue to lose. Come on, dog. The loss of income, the loss of a salary, bonuses, benefits, and other compensation which such employment entails, and plaintiff has also suffered future pecuniary losses, emotional pain, suffering, inconvenience, loss of enjoyment of life, and other non-pecuniary losses. As defendant's conduct has been malicious, willful, outrageous, and conducted with full knowledge of the law, plaintiff demands punitive damages. After all that, we finally get to the actual work issue, wage and hour violations. I really don't feel like going through this shit because this was the original, this was the bulk of the original filing. And all of a sudden it's been like sensationalized to where this is now on page 18. And we got to deal with your shit. From the inception of his employment, plaintiff was misclassified as an independent contractor. How was you misclassified? While working as a personal cameraman to defendant Pete. Oh, yeah, you're done, sir. Plaintiff has been treated as an independent contractor by Roc Nation and Stallion Entertainment so that he was effectively denied any of the protections an employee would have under California law. In April 2018, the California Supreme Court, in the now infamous Dynamics decision, ruled that companies must successfully meet three-pronged ABC test in order to lawfully classify someone as an independent contractor for purposes of wage order claims. The ABC test requires an employer to prove the following to justify independent contractor classification. A, The worker is free from the control and direction of the hiring entity in the performance of the work, both under the contract for the performance of the work and in fact. B, the worker performs work that is outside the usual course of the hiring entity's business. And C, the worker is customarily engaged in an independently established trade, occupation, or business of the same nature the work performed for the hiring entity. Sir, all your shit here, this ABC test is horse shit. Because again, we can go on Instagram. Matter of fact, since we're talking about it, I'm only finna go back so far on his Instagram. But as you can see, this is like the end of 2020. Megan Thee Stallion kind of dominates, which why wouldn't she? She's his primary client. So photos of Megan, they're out and about moving around. But let's just see if he has any other clients that show up. Okay? Let's just do that. Megan Thee Stallion, still primary client. He's putting out his whack music because he's also an artist, wants to be a performer as well. All right. So we see Megan, we see himself. We see Megan with the City Girls at the time. We see, who's this, Chloe? We see some unwanted photos here. More Megan. And again, he's traveling around the world with her, so I can understand why he wouldn't have a surplus of other people. But who's this? Model Christopher Aguirre. Photographer Emilio Garcia. This is August 7th, 2021. So here, this establishes that you have a practice outside of Megan Thee Stallion. I'm not an investigative journalist or anything like that. I'm just saying. More Megan. Megan and Party that hasn't been taken down. More Megan. What year are we in now? 2021, about to go into 2022. The year where they end up falling out for the most part. All of the weird stuff happens. Who's this? Model Miss Haley Lane. This was February 2nd, 2022. Establishing someone else on your camera. Vitamin B Queen. January 2022. Someone else on your camera. Just saying, if you weren't allowed to work with other clients, there's at least a couple other clients. Who's this? Sticky Lauren. Photographer Emilio Garcia, September 2022. For those of y'all that have been here, y'all know we did this once before, but we're moving forward. December 28th, 2022. More clients. I've been blackballed. I can't make no money. But yet we see more photos. Now, whether or not you're good at procuring clients, that's on you. More Megan. We got content from his music. So he's becoming more and more involved in the music space. What is this? Megan 2023. This is around the time the complete fallout happens. More Megan. June 10th, 2023. LA Pride. I wonder if he was disgusted at that. Princess Nokia. She's an artist. June 15th, 2023. I don't see the model's name here, but someone else in his camera. Someone else in his camera. More Megan, June 21st, 2023. Someone else in his camera. Hmm. Who this? H-Town Most Necessary Show for Spotify. Is that, who is it? Kinderman? Monoleo? I think that's Monoleo. I'll give you that because that was an event. So you might not even been hired to be there. You might have just went with your camera. Someone else. September 2023. We have photos here. Halloween season. Get at me for a shoot. That looks like Normani in the top corner. Zarina Akers, Ashley Selden, somebody with a Scream mask on. October 2023. I mean, if you shooting Normani, you didn't get paid for that. You're not allowed to be in spaces with other celebrities. That sounds inaccurate. Event photography, I won't say because you could just show up anywhere. Someone else on your camera. I love when a simple shoot turns out cute. Well, that's your niece. I'll give you that one too. She related to you. What else we got? I don't know who these folks are, but Gemini season. This is 2024. You're still booking people as of last year. You're not completely destitute. You got more clients here. 2024, you're still booking people. Now look at this here. You see how we use natural lighting for our shoot? Very mindful, very eco-friendly, very demure. We're saving energy, cost efficient, less electricity, very demure. Maybe you should up your cost efficient and up them prices so you can take care of yourself. Some more folks in your camera. Wait, I thought you couldn't work for nobody. Sonny the Rapper. So this is another artist. I've seen that name before. Sonny the Rapper. It looks to me like y'all done a couple shoots together. Just wanted to show that real quick. We're not gonna harp on that too long. But as you can see, he's been able to book other people. On September 18th, 2019, California Governor Gavin Newsom signed Assembly Bill AB 5, commonly referred to as the Gig Worker Law. AB 5 codified Dynamics ABC test under the soon-to-be, added Labor Code 2750.3, creating a rebuttable presumption that a worker is an employee unless the test is met, and explicitly exempted certain trades and professions. Neither the plaintiff or defendants were exempted under AB 5. I would love to know what that AB 5 entails, but I'm quite sure that's a lot. Wow, 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 wow. All it took was a simple Google search. AB 2257 exempts many workers from Assembly Bill AB 5. The controversy surrounding AB 5 became so intense that on September 4th, 2020, the California legislature passed and Governor Gavin Newsom signed Assembly Bill 2257, which went into effect immediately and rewrote a number of the requirements of AB 5. It exempts a long list of categories from AB 5. Amongst those exempted from the strictures are still and video photographers and editors. One of the first things noted is your profession. Freelance writers, content contributors, editors, translators, fine artists, and musicians. One key change was the removal of caps for categories of freelancers that had limited the number of contributions they could make to an outlet such as a website without having to be reclassified as employees. However, workers for gig economy companies such as Lyft and Uber were not exempted. And I remember that being like a big conversation of whether or not the Uber and Lyft drivers in California were going to be employees, but I didn't know that that was under the AB 5 bill because I didn't live out there and I didn't have a reason to be so clued in. But again, this website In the first sentence of exempted occupations is still and video photographers and editors. Boy, you are burnt toast. Your lawyers are piss poor. On or around July 18th, plaintiff supported defendant Pete as a personal. I don't even give a fuck about this stuff no more. Because all your arguments here are now null and void. He was being paid $4,000 a month while working for Roc Nation and Stallion Entertainment. However, around August of 2022, Desi Perez, she's the CEO of Roc Nation, she personally contacted him to say, you're going from a monthly rate to a pay-per-task system, invoiced for each assignment. Despite this change, the time expectation, and I'm not surprised by that. If this is August of 2022, I wouldn't be surprised if Roc Nation looked at the labor code and said, we paying this motherfucker too much. We're treating him like an employee. We need to be treating him as the independent contractor that he is. Sucks for you. But again, you could always quit. Oh boy. It's already been an hour. During travels with Pete, plaintiff was required to stay at the hotel, be on standby at all times. Let's be clear here. You're not paying for your own hotel. You're not paying for your travel. So let's not act like being around was an inconvenience to you. We've talked about all this stuff. So here he claims that he was denied meal breaks or rest breaks. In addition, plaintiff was not paid meal or rest break premiums during his entire employment. You weren't an employee, you were a contractor, which means that your meals and breaks are not actually covered by the company. For all relevant times, Pete controls and directs the performance of plaintiff's duties. Did not qualify him for overtime. You weren't an employee. If you worked in excess of 8 hours, that's up between you and your agreement. On set, you could be working 8 hours, you could be working 15 hours, you could be working 20 hours sometimes on set. Now, in the film industry, where you have a union backing you, there is precedent set where you would have to get overtime pay. However, working on personal cameraman vibes, which means y'all not even really doing a lot of studio content, you're really just filming her during her travels. I don't see how that's even possible. Cause you're not her press photo person for the most part. You're not doing her magazine shoots. You're not shooting her tour footage necessarily. You're just around getting candids. And there was a couple studio joints in that Instagram page and some tour photography too. But compared to the amount that's out there, not that much. So I'm really not trying to read all this shit because we just read something that debunks your entire thing with this whole complaint for real. As third cause of action against all defendants, aiding and abetting discrimination. Aiding and abetting? This a whole bunch of hoo-ha. I'm not finna waste my time on this shit. I've wasted enough of it. Now it's time for me to get my kid and enjoy the rest of my evening. Plaintiff was entitled to be paid at the statutory rate of time and a half. No, you weren't. You were never an employee. Yeah, I'm done. I'm done here. I wanted to go through it, but This shit is insulting to people's intelligence, and I have a low tolerance for that. Y'all let me know what y'all think of this down below in the comments. Be sure to like and share this video. If this is your first time seeing me on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, become an insider. If you want to see this thing for yourself, maybe I'll link y'all to it or something. Y'all can read through the rest of this bullshit on your own time. But this shit was aggravating me because it's clear you were never an employee. So X out all of that wage shit. Then when it comes to the sexual harassment and all of this stuff and you being forced to witness sexual activities, where are we supposed to be able to prove that these engagements happened? We don't have no audio, visual, photo evidence. Maybe Alex will come to your defense if this thing goes before a judge or a trial. Maybe. So maybe Alex could be your saving grace in terms of like what they witnessed and what they saw, their head being yanked back, which would be physical violence. So hopefully Alex will testify on your behalf so that you can prove that. But if you can't prove none of that neither, this thing is going to be a complete waste of the court and our time and yours and the money that you've put into it. Again, I will catch y'all on the next one. Peace.
King of my city and cul-de-sac. Coming out swinging like soldier rag. Leading my people like quarterback. But I study this shit on my almanac. Had to get up and grind. Knowledge is booming, I'm here to apply. Came with the chip and the dip, it just single the mind. We finna do more than survive. I need my check. Spinning the block for the Gouda. We hitting the jeweler to flood out the net. We don't do beef for computers, I'm straight out the sewer. We come when you rest. Niggas be looking perplexed, so keeping my foot on their neck. No map, I trust my gut for the quest. But drama, I'm fully abreast. I was ready for years and they died of me. All of a sudden they tell me they proud of me. I been dropping these haters like calories. Cross some out, came back with some boundaries. Stand for my honor, but too raw, no corner. Packing the stick with a drummer. Wanna catch my bad, won't fumble. I done came too far to be humble.